if you want to get started and it is 8 o'clock.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Regional Wastewater Reclamation Advisory Committee meeting of August 25, 2022. Please mute your microphones. This will help ensure we do not have any feedback or any other background noise to interfere with the speaker. If a committee member would like to ask a question, please use the raise your hand feature. Please remember to lower your hand once your question has been addressed. When you are ready to speak, please unmute your microphone. This is especially important during votes. Do not forget to mute yourself when finished. As a reminder, audience members are only permitted to ask or permitted to speak during the call to the audience unless called upon by the committee. This meeting is being recorded to satisfy the open meeting law requirements. Good morning, everyone. So, Monica, can we do the call to the order and roll call, please?
Scott Oldendorf.
Here.
Claire Zucker.
Here.
Steve Foley.
Here.
Matt Mathewson.
Here.
Asia Philbin. Asia Philbin. I think she dropped off. Mark Taylor.
Here.
Anne-Marie Wolf.
Here.
Rob Kulikowski. Rob. I can see him.
Here.
Okay, there you are.
Okay, do we have a quorum, Veronica?
Yes.
Very good.
Let me just chime in, Scott. You know, last time when we had the meeting, I think we started with 9 members, and we knew one of them had to step off, and that dropped us to 8, but we had 2 more step off, and it lost the quorum, and so we couldn't continue. Right now, unless Asia gets back on, we're right at 7, which is just barely a quorum, so hopefully everybody can stay and not drop off. If you do drop off, we're gonna have to stop the meeting, so.
So just remember, you may drop off and think you got away with it, but we know and Veronica sees everything. So please, everybody, do not drop off. If you have to drop off, please announce it and tell Veronica so we're not surprised. Okay, next is a Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, now we have a call to the audience. Is there anybody having anything to say and call to the audience? All right, hearing none. Next is going to be safety share. If somebody could come up with something instead of Jackson always having to do it all.
I was ready for another one.
Oh, okay, well, Jackson, go for it.
You know, I'm actually still in one that Jeff used yesterday in one of our meetings. It's a good one. You know, first off there's a lot of road construction and projects that involve barricades and redirected traffic on the road. You know, wastewater is one of those entities that has a lot of work in the roadway. And we always appreciate people slowing down and follow the information and guidance that the setup provides. Also, school just started recently, so, you know, we're back to having school zones, and the chaos around some areas where it seems like traffic hangs out into the main thoroughfare because they're overloaded with space and trying to pick up and drop off kids. Well, at any rate, one of our job contractors that does a lot of road related projects in the roadway. They're working for us in many areas, but one that's not a wastewater job, but they're doing that overpass and highway project in Sahuarita on Interstate 19 and Sahuarita Road. And we had heard that one of their workers, on the highway, traffic is instructed to slow down to 45 miles an hour going through that zone. And that's on the interstate below the overpass where most of the work is, but they do have some staging areas down below at highway level. And apparently one of their workers, a 28-year-old young man, crossed the highway to get to a different staging area and got hit by a vehicle and lost his arm. So, and that vehicle that hit him, one was slowing down that saw him and was following the speed limits or even slower. But because that car was ahead of the second vehicle, it was passing, going too fast, and didn't see him because the guy was originating in front of that other car. And that was it. So just remember, slow down in all the construction zones and school zones. Take your time and pay close attention because a lot of things happen out there. That's a.
Any other safety share from anyone? I'll just add, we're in a political time frame right now, so watch out for blockages from political signs, not seeing things as you're going around corners and all that. So just mindful of your driving. Any other safety shares?
No, but just Veronica, Asia is in person over here helping us eat these breakfast burros. So Scott must have got to them all already.
I ate all the virtual burritos. Okay, hearing no more safety share, we get to the approval of the minutes. Hopefully everyone has had an opportunity to read the minutes from June 23rd of 2022. Do I have any corrections, amendments, or anything like that from anyone? Do I have a motion to approve the minutes as stated?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, thank you, Anne Marie. Also, do I have a second?
Sorry, I moved and Anne Marie seconded it at the same time.
Okay, well, then Veronica can straighten that out then. Okay, very good. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstain or any nays or abstains?
I'll abstain, I wasn't there.
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna have to say I'll abstain too because I was not there. All right, so the minutes pass. We go to, let's see, action. Allison Jones made a motion to approve the minutes from May 26, 2022. Oh, okay, that was just the motions.
Those are the minutes from that meeting.
Yes, okay.
They're approved. So.
Okay, so now we get into the discussion action. Let's talk about the capital program office presentation. And
You're looking at the wrong one. Yeah.
am I looking at it?
You're looking at last month's.
Oh,
That's the
sorry, everyone. This is what happens in retirement when you get up too early. Okay, very good. Next is going to be the discussion action item with the director's update with Jackson Jenkins.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. And I just have 3 topics that I'd like to talk about real quick. First was based on the last meeting discussion we had on the consolidation of the CIP group or the capital delivery group. Nancy Cole came and gave a presentation. We had a lot of interaction and discussion, but at the end of it, the committee asked, suggested, recommended, wanted to prepare some type of letter to the county administration with their feedback or comments on that action and whatnot. So there is a draft letter, draft response that was shared with all of you in the packet. And I just put it under the director's discussion to see how you want to. Please mute your microphone. We're getting some feedback. Thank you. It's really up to the committee what they want to do. If they want to edit that document, they want to talk about it some more, they want to bless it and move it forward. I'll just shut up for a minute and let's hear what comments or feedback anybody has on that item.
I can give some feedback. I actually think the letter is very well done. I think it addressed our concerns that were brought up at the meeting. So I would be comfortable moving it forward, but like to hear other people's feedback.
Well, Anne Marie said moving. That sounded like a motion to me. I'll second it for discussion.
Actually, it was not a motion, but I will make a motion to forward the letter, the draft letter, to finalize it as is and forward it. Okay. How's that?
And I do second that.
So other discussion,
I have no discussion other than I'm fine with the letter and I'm prepared to approve it when we have the vote.
Yeah, I also think it expresses our concerns well.
I would also agree with that. I liked the bullets and the way it really laid it out. I thought it was a good letter.
I agree. Thanks for putting it together. Good work.
Yeah, I have to, of course, I like taking all the credit for everything. That's my MO, but Veronica put a lot of effort into it. So the appreciation and kudos go to Veronica for this.
She's a great ghostwriter. Oh, you want to do a motion then?
So they already made a motion in a second. I was just waiting to see
Okay, so
if there was any
we
other
have a
comments.
motion, we have a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any nays?
Okay,
Any abstains? Motion so passes.
okay, we'll get that finalized and off for Scott's signature, and we'll get it over to county administration. So thank you for your feedback, and Veronica, thank you for your effort. Next item I have is the Finger Rock Canyon flood. Don't know how much you guys have heard locally on the news, but up there at Finger Rock Canyon, that's the area below one of the burn areas from over a year ago. And last year in that area, after the fire, during the monsoon season, there was a fair amount of runoff. Of course, that happens around a lot of fires when there isn't a lot of the vegetation to absorb and hold things back. And so our sewer line was damaged, the roads were damaged, and houses were damaged. And as a result of last year, it wasn't horrible for us last year. We did have to do some repairs on our system, but they weren't overly exorbitant, but it was still unfortunate. But as a result of that flood, flood control went in and brought in a lot of riprap and did the things that they do along the drainage way and the floodway and the river, and secured it and did what they could do. And then whatever DOT had to do in roads and stuff, a lot of work happened last year. Well, this year it happened again, but this time it was on steroids, and it really came through there. And I heard that flood control is looking at buying up some of the houses in that area. A bunch of houses got damaged, some of them again, because they also were damaged last year. But this time, from a wastewater perspective, it was much, much worse for us. And we were kidding with flood control about all the riprap and rocks and boulders they brought in to help secure things and keep the channel where it was. Well, a lot of them disappeared, and everybody wondered how far downstream they went. Well, they didn't go too far. Most of them ended up in our sewer line. A lot of the crowns and tops of manholes that run along the drainage were washed away and filled our pipes with sediment, but mostly rocks and good sized rocks. Jaime called them boulders too. And Jaime's on the phone, but I forget, Jaime, that was a 8-inch line up there or 6 inch?
8-inch.
8-inch, yeah. And so we've been up there for the past couple of weeks working on that project, and we still probably have a couple weeks to go. We're replacing line, lining our pipeline and the replaced sections. We're going to pour concrete caps over manholes to help prevent again, will it happen again? Who knows? Lightning struck twice, can it do it 3 times? So we're looking at about $1 million of costs that we're gonna expend up there on just our part, not to mention what flood control and DOT are doing as well. And so I did not, so in this recent conversation I had with the finance department, I don't have $1 million sitting in my pocket to, I have a very tight budget. Everything that we're planning to do this year is accounted for, and hopefully we'll do it. And then here comes $1 million that we need to spend. So there is a post-fire fund that's out there that the county's emergency management group is spearheading the effort to apply for some of the funds that are still available, but they don't cover a lot of things, and especially they don't cover the damage. It wasn't for damage, but it's for mitigation for future events. So some of our work could be covered. And then debris removal, because I think removing boulders and rocks out of our conveyance line counts as debris removal. We will put in a request of that $1 million. We haven't got enough detail worked out yet to determine how much is gonna maybe qualify, maybe, that's a big maybe. But we will submit and just see if any funds come our way. But if we don't get any, or obviously we won't get all of it covered, I'm moving to request an insurance claim, or that $20 million that we keep in emergency account for special events. I think this would qualify in that arena. And that's where I would say, well, I'm going to take $1 million from there to make sure we can still do the rest of our budget and handle this, this issue that came up. So I'm just making you aware of it. There's still a lot of internal county discussions. First thing we're going to do is try and get the post-fire funding, but I don't know how long it will take. Flood control actually already made a request for that funding, and they were just turned down. The reason they were turned down is because last year, because of this event, they went and put their hand out for a federal grant to do some work. And these post-fire funds, I don't know if they're managed through the state or where they're managed, but they said flood control, they couldn't support them because they already had funds coming in from a grant, and they won't, they don't mix and match those funds. So they said, by default, you already got some money coming your way. You're off of our list. Sorry, but that's the way it is. We don't have any such thing going on. So hopefully some of our work will qualify and we'll get some money, but stay tuned. I'll give you an update, financially after it all settles out, but we're still up there working. We haven't finished our costs, but the current estimate is getting close to $1 million. So Jaime, do you have anything you want to add, or how about if I go to Mark on his question, and then if you have anything, Jaime, you want to add, let me know. Mark?
Yeah, just real quick, I was curious, how, obviously you guys know your sewer system better than anybody. Do you have other areas that are also vulnerable, like Finger Rock, that you've had problems with in the past that could do the same thing with localized flows in those areas? I just wonder, how often does this happen, and how many areas are vulnerable to this happening?
I
can say that in the foothills, there's a good amount of older 50s, 60s, 70s sewer lines that were installed on the washes because it was the most convenient location for them. They were low compared to the areas where the houses were built. So there are many areas in the foothills that have washes where the sewer lines run. This particular one, because of the fire, the amount of water that's been coming down the last 2-3 years has been way above average. We haven't had a problem like this in the past that I can recall.
Jaime, I know we had, it's been a few years, but I can't remember if it was the RITO or the CDO, but we did have a crown of our sewer get washed out during the flood and filled the system with debris. It wasn't tremendously expensive, but we did have to go clean that up and do some repairs at that location. But yeah, anywhere that our sewers are in a wash, which is in a fair number of places, there's always challenges, and that's just kind of the business we're in, unfortunately.
Yeah, the only reason, and I believe me, I've designed a lot of sewers down washes back in the old days. That's what we did. So I wasn't sure if you needed to have special funds put away for stuff, if this is a regular occurrence, and And sometimes seems like we get some more intense rains along with our drought. I didn't know if we needed to have funds put away specifically for that. That was the only thing I was thinking.
And then up, these are just normal things, but like up on Mount Lemon right now, with a lot of the rainfall, our plant has seen some, typically we're running, what, Jeff, around 3,500 gallons maybe a day. Of course, you get a little increases on weekends when it gets more tourists and visitors. And of course, there's seasonal up and downs, but we've been running around 3,500 gallons a day. But recently with all these rains, we're getting some high levels of infiltration. And I mean, we've hit 30,000 gallons per day flow on a couple of incidences. And of course, it's only a 20,000 gallon per day facility rated for that. So Jaime and his team have been up there looking to see if anything's unusual, checking the sewer line out. We haven't found any culprits, and of course, flows have dropped back down, but during certain events, whether a manhole was missing or, it was runoff or what it was, we haven't found a culprit, but we're still keeping our eye out up there. But, those happen from time to time as well. All right, but at least the sewer line's flushed really well now. Okay, I'll move on to my final topic, and it's one I started to talk about last month before we had the quorum break apart. And I just wanted to share, to me, I think this is very important. This committee is primarily focused on the financial wherewithal of this organization, both capital and operations, and how it relates to rates and whatnot. And, finance does a great job partnering with us in all the discussions and interactions with this committee. But I just have had for the longest time this concern, and this year it's even kind of, caused me more concern, and that's how the reporting, what we cover, and like, I know Mandy will go over her update here shortly, a little later in the agenda, but, every time I see the word depreciation, I just kind of go ballistics, because all this time, I've been the director for quite some time. I've been in the department now for over 18 years. And we've made it a big effort in our culture to educate and inform all of our employees, but especially managers and supervisors that have a little more impact in what it costs to run this utility. Make sure they know how much chemical we're using or how much electricity, and why doing this or that or the other thing is important, as we obviously have regulatory compliance at the front of everything we do, as well as safety, but cost and the economics of our business are very important. And people have really, they really think about the expenditures of things we do quite well. But, when we look at the main presentation of costs, I just hate mixing cash costs with non-cash costs, and depreciation is not a cash cost. Another thing that happened on the budget year, the fiscal year that just ended, we spent very close to every penny we had budgeted, but right at the end, the pension fund, outside of anybody's control, it kind of had a credit. And of course, finance has to keep a balance sheet and debits and credits and all that stuff. And so they threw in a 1.9, almost a $2 million credit from the pension fund. So if somebody looks at the O&M budget, they're going to say, oh, you guys didn't spend 2 million. You maybe are asking for too much, you didn't spend it all. Well, we do spend it all. We could spend more than all of it, of course, but that's what we do. We manage within our budget. And so I take a comparison of how I run, or how I should say how my wife runs the finances in my house. We, you have all of your regular bills, and you know what your bills typically are, what your mortgage is, and how much you've loaned. If you're going to buy a new car, and you have to decide if you have enough money, you have your big debt service, which is your principal and interest on the big purchases, and then all of your regular stuff. And I never bring in non-cash costs to figure out if the amount we're budgeting is enough for the cash flow, and if our rates are enough to cover that. And so, I don't want to downplay the side of it that finance tracks, because that is financial accounting and reporting requirements. bonding agencies, rating agencies, regulatory agencies, all those people want to see certain things. But 18 and a half years I've been here, I've never once talked about depreciation in any of my team meetings or my staff meetings or to our group, because it doesn't mean anything to us. And some people say, well, depreciation is used primarily for offsetting revenues or income to reduce your tax obligation or your tax purpose, and that doesn't apply to us. And it can be used as an idea or a reference to see if you're reinvesting in your system enough, but we are so far beyond, that's just a general rule of thumb that maybe gives somebody an easy filling. We use real life stuff, people in the field. We've got CCTV footage that tells me whether we're investing enough in our conveyance system. We have mechanics, electricians, instrument folks out there touching every piece of equipment every day, telling us if we're investing in the equipment at the rate we need to. And that's how we know. That's what drives the expenditure needs. It's observation, evaluation of our equipment. It's not some formula, straight line depreciation for this many years or that many years. So I'm just proposing that, and one other thing I'll add, just what finally kind of broke the straw on the camel's back. I was at the board meeting back in June, I think it was, when we were presenting this current fiscal year's budget. Back when we presented it, it was last fiscal, we were in last fiscal year. But the budget we presented, the package, finance doing what they need to do for their reporting purposes, it stated in there that the biggest expense for wastewater was depreciation. And Supervisor Rex Scott asked me, that was one of the questions. He's like, well, tell me about your depreciation. Like, what are you going to do? Well, I'm not going to do anything about depreciation because it's just a number for reporting purposes. But I'm going to do everything I can to run this utility efficiently and appropriately and safely and within regulatory compliance. And we're going to ask for the funds that we need to do that every year. And hopefully we'll get support from the Board of Supervisors. But I just think it's misleading when we mix non-cash costs with cash costs. And I hope that this committee, has some thoughts or comments on it and really request how you want to see reports going forward directly from finance. But I'm going to continue to push for cash cost only accounting for my team and for the department, for us to continue to be savvy about the decisions we make and not confuse them when they look, hey, we didn't spend $2 million in our budget this year, and you have to try and explain how the pension fit in there. The pension didn't give me a $2 million check. It's just a balance sheet type of thing, a debit and a credit. So I'll shut up, and I just kind of put it out there, just an opinion and a perspective, and I hope we can shift more to that direction. And if you want to comment on it, feel free, but otherwise that concludes my report out.
I have a question on that, what you were just talking about. So, and I understand what you're saying about there's the concept that the depreciation would tie to what's actually going on with your assets. And I'm just wondering, because in my job, and we've tried to tie the asset management systems and the financial systems and had a real difficulty there. And I just don't know, have you tried to do that? Or is that an effort that the county's considered and it's just too?
Well, I'll let finance comment if they want, but just last year, we spent 67 million approximately in debt service. That's principal and interest of our loans, plus additional funds that did not include defeasance. And you're all familiar with the defeasance where we're paying some of our future debt ahead of time, because of, the expenditure limitation issues in the county and how we're, trying to get to that pay-go level. And so I think finance is managing that extremely well, the defeasance and bringing us from our original 15-year period. I think we're down to about a 10-year payback cycle. And I think we're ultimately targeting a 5-year or less payback cycle. And I'm sure we'll get there, but it just seems like the numbers I saw for depreciation were, in the 50s of million. And we're over that quite a bit in our actual debt service at 67 million, for instance, last year, plus defeasance. Those numbers don't match up. And so if you look at O&M costs and depreciation, it's way lower overall than O&M costs and real debt service, including defeasance. So it's just a perspective, but, you know, great question. And if they were very close, what's the difference? But I think they're fairly far apart, and they tell a different story. Steve, you have your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. I'm at a loss to understand why depreciation is even included in our budget. Is it something that is required, or do we have the choice of to just remove it from the budget?
Well, it's required for certain aspects of what accounting the finance department has to do. But I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't show a cash only budget for discussion. And even to the board, I think it's misleading. And if I was on the board, I'd want to just see, you know, do we need to raise rates or don't we? And why not? You know, what is our spend rate, you know, dollars out and dollars in? But that's just me. That's why I'm bringing it up.
Yeah, because what you're saying to me is a compelling argument, and I certainly support what you're suggesting. So I'll give other people a chance to comment.
Mark, you were next.
Yeah, I guess I have the same question. I'm actually looking at the next agenda item and looking at the numbers, and it's been a while since I really dove into it. So I really forgot how we're dealing with this, if we're dealing with accrual versus cash. And so I'm assuming, Asia, I know you live this, is this what you consider an accrual budget, or looking at it from an accrual standpoint? And do you have both an accrual and a cash statement that we look at?
I don't know, I thought I see Mandy and maybe Meredith was on there. I'm not sure who all's on from finance. If they want to comment, feel free. Well, just Mandy. Meredith isn't even on there anymore.
Yeah, the enterprise fund is an accrual basis, which is why you see depreciation on there.
Okay, so you have to do it from accrual basis, just because that's how the enterprise fund works.
Right.
Do you all, and a lot of times we'll keep, I know it's not called two sets of books, but we'll do an accrual basis report and a cash basis report. Do you do both reports or just accrual?
They're accrual, but when you look at your cash flow, you'll see the cash in and out. And those are in your audited financial statements.
So I
Yeah,
guess, so maybe if Jackson's question is, I mean, I totally agree that for us as a group, it's way more important to see the cash side, because I understand why you have to do an accrual, but cash is really the basis of how we look at it for rates. Are we accumulating cash? Are we losing cash? Do we need to raise our rates? So I guess the question is, I'm totally behind you, Jackson. We don't need to see the depreciation. We don't need to see the accrual funds. We really need to look at it cash. And it's a lot easier to understand, and it probably helps us do our job much easier that way. I just didn't know if that's a lot more work to do it, but if you already have it, maybe that's what we should be focusing on.
I just would just caution the team when the group, when you're thinking about that, when I'm presenting later on, we can look at it a little bit more closely. But if you take the depreciation out, I don't want anyone to be under the impression that the $193 million revenue that you have budgeted can all be utilized. And that's just your opportunity, because there is a $63 million line item in the audited financial statements. So I don't want anyone to get the impression that you have $193 million to spend, because that's definitely not the case when it comes to whether or not your income statement is going to show that you had, earned 193 million minus your operating, which is the 91 million. So in your mind, you might think you have $100 million to spend, and on your income statement, it would not be that. So it's just the concern of whether or not you're getting the full picture versus a very small subset of the true picture. So just going into the decision-making process on your end, just keep that in mind.
So maybe the question is, Manny, and I'm looking at the numbers, I see that 63 million. if we truly do get 193 million in revenues, that is cash. And then we
Well,
have
the
our,
capital contributions is not. That's one line item. If we go down this direction, that is a contribution of asset from other entities. Jackson, you can probably speak to this a lot better.
Whenever a developer builds a subdivision and hands over the conveyance sewer system to us, the value of that asset is booked in a revenue, but it's just a physical asset is all it is, and that's not cash.
okay. So we have a lot of non-cash items here. You have the capital contributions of 11, which isn't a real cash amount. We have 63 million in depreciation, which is non-cash. Does that even out? Or I guess what I'm asking is if you get rid of all the non-cash items in there and we just have a pure cash report, does it show we have extra cash each year that goes and builds up our cash account? Is that the wrong way to look at it?
I wouldn't necessarily look at it that way because it's not a 1-for-1. As you can see, depreciation is 63 million and your capital contribution is 11. So it's definitely not a direct it's a direct impact on your overall profit and loss statement, I guess you could say. But you're right, it is not, capital contributions is not cash. However, it is an asset that in some cases, depending on the asset, would then be depreciated over the life of that asset. So
I guess, and maybe I'm just used to having all three financial statements. We look at the income statement, the balance statement, and the cash flow. And I always focus on the cash flow because that really shows how we're doing this year.
right, and there is audited cash flow statements. So, and maybe that's where, something that might be a good idea to look at. And they're published on the Pima County website. If you wanted to look at the last one, the last final audited financial statement so that you could see the cash flow and the ins and outs of cash, that might be a good thing to take a look at before you make this decision. Just my recommendation.
And maybe what we can do is maybe next month, you can do a side by side. You could do your regular, presentation here. And then you could show us the cash flow statement and talk about the cash flow statement on that same presentation. And maybe that will give us the feeling of both. Okay, I see it's accrual here. This is what it shows. But here's the cash flow statement. I see how we're doing cash wise. Maybe that presentation of showing both in your presentations will help us understand the difference between the two.
Sure, and just to keep in mind, what we're looking at is a very the whole the whole fiscal year 23 budgeted items. The cash flow is going to be, from inception to date. So that's just the variance. I'm just wanted to say that up front before we go down that that avenue.
I'm just kind of following Jackson's lead. That is our job. And it seems like the more we understand it from both sides, the cash and the accrual side, I think it'll help us understand it a little better. And it may be best through your presentation rather than us going back and looking at it. We're not going to know looking at.
Sure.
All right, Anne Marie, did you want to make a question or a comment? You're muted, Anne Marie.
Wondering, I'm just looking at it, if we get more detail on the personnel services and supplies and services, because that's is that when Jackson, when you're saying you're looking at your budget, that's kind of what you have control of?
That's the stuff we focus on the most is our O&M budget. But at the same time, debt service of principal and interest is more important to me than depreciation, because true debt service of principal and interest plus defeasance, at least at this time in our life, is something that's checks going out the door, and that compares to that 193 million in revenue or minus the capital contribution that Mandy mentioned, 180 some million. That's where you get to really see, what the dollars went out the door and what dollars came in the door. And of course, right now, we have been generating more revenue than cost. That's why we're paying defeasance every year, because we have extra cash to do that, because we can't just spend more to pay off a capital project because of that expenditure limitation that is a statutory limit that the county is obligated with, so. It's, to me, it's just makes more sense from what we talk about and what we do to just see that cash statement, that's why I brought it up.
Armando, did you have a question?
Actually,
I'm sorry, Amber.
Yeah.
Hold on.
And I understand exactly what you mean about depreciation, because when I'm doing my budgets, I put that depreciation in and I follow a straight line or, 7-year, 5-year, or depending on what it is. I'm not building infrastructure, so I don't have a long depreciation. But I also, as you said, I don't have control over it. And when my equipment's depreciated, it's not like I stopped using it. So I understand your concern. So maybe seeing just some more details every quarter or something on some of those or monthly. I'm not sure I want to get rid of this whole sheet though, that we're being presented, because it is the true accrual, it is the true budget for the department.
Accrual budget, yeah.
Yeah, it gives the accrual, sorry, I'm not Smith, budget for the department, but seeing some of those items in a bit more detail that you really focus on, or some of Mark's ideas too about looking at the cash flow, it would give us maybe a little bit better feel as well. So I'm not ready to throw out this sheet. I actually like looking at this sheet, but maybe having some additional data on cash flow might help us.
Thanks. Armando, you've been patient, what do you got?
Well, Jackson, I was wondering, does the board see this line item?
Which line item, Armando?
The depreciation?
The board sees depreciation, yes.
And if we take it out, will they continue to see it or not? Does it show up on any other reports?
On the accrual budget that accounting and finance shows to the board, it's on there. And I don't care if they want to show that to them, but like I said, I just think seeing a cash budget would be, a cash flow statement discussions would be more meaningful and helpful to us. And personally, I think the board would benefit by it too. I think there's a lot of confusion when you're seeing these numbers and is it cash or non-cash? Depreciation is insignificant in our business. So,
Well, I'm a little reluctant to take it out completely. I don't know where else you could put it. Maybe there's a place. Thank you.
Matt, you had a question or comment?
Yes,
Yeah,
thank you.
you.
Certainly, Jackson, I feel the same way that you do about this reporting system, having, worked with you on these issues in the past. It's always been a frustration trying to make total sense of the reports that finance is either giving to us or having us maintain. And we talked about the CIP consolidation. Our finance expertise was consolidated years and years ago, and so you're at a disadvantage, I think, to be able to develop, have the kind of expertise you need to develop the kind of reporting structure that you need, and that just makes it that much more important, I think, for the finance department to really want to provide you with the support that you need to get to where you're comfortable in managing the department. And so I would just encourage Mandy and the team to really try to sit down with you and your folks and frankly our committee's financial subcommittee is available too to meet and try to develop what everyone thinks would be the most meaningful system for you primarily, and the board secondarily, and us in line. So I am glad that you've raised the issue. I think that work needs to be done to get us to a point where the financial data makes sense and where we can really look at and use it as a management tool.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Jackson? Okay, thank you, Jackson. Going next on the agenda is the Compliance and Regulatory Affairs Office update by Max.
That one, we pulled off the agenda because the presenter had to go into quarantine. So
Uh-oh.
we'll get that one on a rebound on another opportunity.
Okay, very good. Okay, then we go next to the CIP subcommittee report with Asia. Asia, it's all yours.
Okay, well, I don't have, the subcommittee did not meet, so I don't have anything new to report. We'll be meeting and we have been working on the letter that just got approved at this meeting, so I think that's great. And we intend to meet early in the new year. That's
Okay.
kind of our schedule. If anyone have anything to add?
Anybody have any questions for Asia? Okay, next is the financial subcommittee report with Matt.
Yeah, likewise, the subcommittee has not met, so we do not have a report on any developments. However, as I just mentioned, the subcommittee is available to this committee and to the department if anybody thinks that that there's a role for us in helping to redevelop the financial reporting that's being used.
Did anybody have a question for Matt? Okay, next on the agenda is the fiscal year 21-22 expense and revenue summary with Mandy. Mandy, it's all yours.
Morning. This is actually period 1 of fiscal year 22-23. If you can believe it, we're in a whole new fiscal year. We're 1 month in already. So this is going to be just a preview of what the 22-23 fiscal year looks like. These are the as of period 1. So you won't see too much happening in the purple area because those are your actuals. After period 1, there's not very much actuals that are posted. So we'll focus on the green section here. This is the personnel budget. It's 32.8 million for fiscal year 23. Supplies and services is 56.5. The anticipated capital equipment purchase is 2 million with an offset. Depreciation is 63.6 and debt service is 17.9 million, bringing the total is $170.9 million. Sewer user fee, we have that budget at 162.6. Sanitation fees at 400,000. Utility fees at 16 million. Capital contributions is the 11 million. We kind of talked about that briefly earlier. And biogas, this is the new revenue stream that was introduced last year, is budgeted now at 2 million. And then other revenue is 1.5 million. So the whole total revenue is 193.6 million. That is the 23 budget. Our projections at this point, because we've only had 1 month pass, projections are basically right at budget at this point until some things we can start to see some trends happening in fiscal year 23. That's where we stand for the summary. Matt, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Again, on the reporting issue, one of the features of this report that's always kind of befuddled or bothered me is that if you line up the total expenses with the total revenues, 171 million versus 194 million, it looks as though we're making a $23 million profit here in the year, and that suggests that our our revenue is way out of whack with our expenses and we're seriously overcharging our ratepayers. And that's even with the depreciation included. And I know that that's not the right way to look at it or not the actual case, but it's a picture that's presented here and to a layman just begs a whole lot of questions. So I'm wondering if in the course of our refinement of reporting that we might be able to develop or demonstrate an explanation of that feature.
Understood. And that's kind of one of the concerns we talked briefly about is taking the 63.6 million out of the depreciation. That's even going to make that difference between the revenue and expense that you see even greater. So, and that's not the picture that we want to present for sure. So that's a great point, Matt. And we'll definitely start taking a different look at this and how we want to present it going forward under the advisement of maybe the financial subcommittee.
Thank you, Mandy.
Sure.
Mark, you have a question for Mandy?
I guess it's along the same side way as Matt. I mean, I want to make sure in here, I don't see the CIP program. Is that right? The expenses that we charge, the expenses we have in accordance with the CIP program. Is that in these numbers here?
That's the capital project budget, and that is separate.
That's separate. So we don't see what we're spending for CIP in these numbers. Is that right?
Correct.
And I think that may make up for a lot of this quote deficit look that we're worried about. It just seems to me that the numbers have to be real. I mean, what comes in have to match what goes out. And I still think that this cash flow should show more of a balanced nature of what's really happening. You know, we're going to have so much money we're going to spend in the CIP program. That's not shown in here. So I think all of that's going to balance out in the cash flow, I'm assuming, once we see it. And once we see it, if we end up with, 10 million of extra cash that year, then we're good. We know our cash account went up by 10. If it's less, then it went down by 10. But I'm assuming that's all going to work its way out in the cash flow statement. I guess we don't know until we see it.
Oh, Asia, you have a question for Mandy?
Yeah, Mandy, I was just wondering, is on the revenue, is the capital contributions, that's the only line that is not a cash line? Is that correct?
I will say that in the other revenue, there might be market adjustments for the investments. So I would need to get a little bit more granular detail on the 1.5 to answer that 100% accurately.
Thanks.
Sure.
Mandy, I have a question for you. What Jackson was talking about with Figure Rock Canyon and emergency funds and all that. What for act of God emergency funds do we have off on the side for emergencies?
$20 million. We have a $20 million emergency reserve fund.
Okay. Yes. Anybody other questions for Mandy?
I have a question about.
Yeah, Asia, go ahead.
So that the emergency reserve fund, does that include like payroll and things like, or is that a
So
separate?
that's a separate fund. We have 3 months of O&M expenses in another fund. But we did set aside like 20 million. I don't know if it's 20 or 21. I'm not sure exact amount, but it's around 20 million. And we haven't touched it ever since we've made it.
Oh.
And it kind of came about because of the Speedway sinkhole, before we ever had such a fund, back when there was the problem on Speedway back, I think it was 2002, maybe. Jim will know every date I throw at him, but that cost the department probably close to 20 million and when all was said and done, and we didn't have that money, so we borrowed it from the county and, just a lot of chaos. So it's nice to have that fund, but we've never used it in the many, many years, 20 or 15 years we've had it, however long it's been. But I'm proposing we may use it for $1 million at this go.
Jackson, I'm not gonna know my locations, but wasn't there a big sinkhole or something around near the School for Deaf and Blind? Or
That was the Speedway.
that was the Speedway one,
Yeah.
okay. Any other questions for Mandy?
Yes,
I'm sorry, Claire.
yeah, I had a quick one. So, like Anne Marie, I like the depreciation in there. I like seeing it there. And in some ways, I think of that as um, a, a symbol of the very great assets owned um, by the, department. So I like that. I wonder if there's a possibility of also combining the CIP project budget with this one to look at it more cohesively over the full picture. Would it be possible to not so much change this one as pull some of these numbers into a bigger perspective?
Claire, I think that, I'm sorry, Mandy, to jump in, but that, the money for the capital this year we're borrowing, it's a mortgage. We're taking out another mortgage to do
Oh, I
the
see.
projects. And so what's missing is where it says debt service, that $17 million, that's primarily the interest. It doesn't show the principal payment, that's what's missing. And so like if there wasn't depreciation and you put principal in there, then you'd come closer to your cash flow. That's real cash. And that, of course, that debt service amount changes as you pay off some and you're taking a new mortgage out each year as we do our capital. And so it's just tracking that cash flow. And of course, defeasance is the extra one that we do because we have the extra cash and we're trying to get to that pay-as-you-go format. So those are all, it's a very dynamic system and, there's a lot of moving pieces. And I think how we look at it will help our conversations.
Yeah, it's hard to show it in a static diagram, right? So.
But you could show what our principal payment is for the year. There's a budgeted principal payment. And of course, as you pay defeasance, that payment goes down, but then you borrow more money the next year. And so it just depends on, I think it's always going to go down until we get to that 5-year pay as you go, assuming our finances are good and we don't have too many finger rock issues. But it's definitely warrants more discussion, and maybe the financial subcommittee is a good place to have that to bring back to the committee.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions for Mandy? Okay, thank you very much, Mandy.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the Citizen Water Advisory Committee, CWAC. That's with Allison. Allison, it's all yours.
Allison is not in attendance today.
Okay, very good.
Is anyone from,
have any questions?
Anybody have any update from the committee? Andrew's on there. I'm not sure who all's on the CWAC anymore, but.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, members, if you'd like, I'm Andrew Greenhill, City of Tucson, and if you'd like, I can give a short overview of what happened at the last CWAC meeting in Allison's place.
Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. CWAC actually had a meeting this month. They were not scheduled to have one, but with everything going on, especially related to Colorado River related issues, they agreed to have a meeting. They met on August 17th, and that agenda pretty much included two things. One was an update from our director, John Kamik, talking about Colorado River related issues. He covered the declaration of a Tier 2A shortage on the river, what that would mean in terms of cuts from our 2023 allocations due to that shortage declaration. He also gave a little bit of an update on discussions amongst other water providers and entities on potential compensated conservation. There was also an update that included that the Inflation Reduction Act, just approved by Congress and signed into law by the president, included $4 billion to help provide compensation and other support for conservation measures across the Colorado River. And we'll be working with the Bureau of Reclamation to see where and how those dollars can be spent, again, for the purposes of protecting the river, conserving as much water as possible. The mayor and council of the city are still open to potential agreements where Tucson would contribute water both in the current water year, 2022, as well as next year, 2023. We continue to seek partners who may also be willing to contribute water, again, for the benefit of Lake Mead and the entire system. The second item that CWAC covered was conservation measures. There's a lot of interest across the community by our customers, as well as mayor and council, to see what we're doing already in terms of promoting or incentivizing conservation, and then looking at other proposals. What else can we do? What's working, what's not, and what might we want to look at? So CWAC spent some time looking at and discussing some of the proposals that mayor and council directed staff to look at. And those include provisions such as modifying the building code that may require the use of EPA WaterSense certified fixtures in new construction, low impact development, requiring irrigation meters for commercial and multifamily properties over specific size or use thresholds, requiring sub-metering for townhome and condo developments, and possibly even implementing a net zero water approach for new development. All of these are complicated. There's a lot of study that needs to go into them. What would be their impacts, their costs, etc. So I wouldn't say anything is imminent, but the CWAC discussed those proposals, came back with a recommendation that they agreed with mayor and council that staff should continue to look into those proposals, and therefore staff is going to continue to investigate each of those and possibly others as we go along. Again, there's strong demand in the community for increased conservation and for the utility to be mindful of equity and other concerns so that more folks, no matter their income level, no matter where they are in the system, are able to participate in those programs should they choose to. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions for Andrew? Well, thank you, Andrew. That was very informative. We really appreciate that, especially on the conservation side of the Colorado River. Okay, next on the agenda is going to be the draft RWRAC annual report review. That being done by the committee people.
Yeah, that one was,
Yes.
Go ahead,
Yes,
Veronica.
so we sent the annual report for the committee's review. So if all looks okay, we would want to see if you guys want to go ahead and approve it.
Do we have a motion to approve the annual report?
I move to approve it.
Claire, okay, any second? No, I'll do a second.
I'll second.
Okay. And who was that seconded, Matt?
Armando, I think.
Armando? Okay. All right,
Yes.
very good. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstains? Okay, the annual report so passes. Thank you, Veronica, for all the hard work that you've done on this. Next is future agenda items. Anybody have anything for the future agenda?
Yeah, I have one that I also think we should talk about. And yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I lose track of my week. But when I had my regular discussion with finance and Ellen, I see Ellen's joined us on the call here. And I hope you all remember Ellen is the new director of finance. She replaced Michelle Campaign. So congratulations to Ellen. And maybe she'll be joining us more. We'll see. But in that discussion, there was at least a conversation or a comment from Ellen that got my neck hairs to stand up. And when we did this year's O&M budget of 91.4 million, as so often happens in the county, they, when they do a raise, like we did this year, a wage raise for our employees, which is very appreciated. And there was a formula based on how much you make, that drove what category of raise, whether you got a 0.5%, a 5%, a 3%, or a 1% based on the volume, the dollars that you earned. At any rate, that formula, when applied to us, was about $1.5 million, close enough for this discussion. And of course, we were not allowed to get $1.5 million more budget dollars added to our budget. We had to, after we completed our budget exercise and had a final budget prepared, not approved, but final budget prepared, we were then told, okay, go find ways to cut your $1.5 million from your budget so you can afford the raises that were going to be given to your employees. So when we do our budget, it's how I've always done budgets every year. We do a zero-based budget. We look at everything that we know and come up with the best estimate. We eliminated more positions again for efficiency we've gathered during the year. And we came in with a bare bones budget with our best information on inflation, what we thought, all this big increases in commodity prices and stuff. We put all of that in the budget. Of course, there's some few minor assumptions made, but very conservative, very close. And so when they asked for $1.5 million, I'm like, well, this isn't going to be something we can do very easily. And I'm sure every department in the county says that, but I mean it when I say it. And at any rate, we thought, well, the one item that I brought up many times to finance is we always have a vacancy savings. We have 401 budgeted positions, and because of turnover, you always have vacancies that save on your wages and benefits category. We've been as high as 10% vacancy savings. Right now, we're at about 8%. At any rate, the county doesn't want to budget for that vacancy savings, and I'm not sure why, but all the time when we're asked to cut our budget, I'm like, well, I'll give up some vacancy savings. I know I'm going to have them, but they don't do that. So I know I'm going to have a vacancy savings. So when that $1.5 million was brought up that we got to find money, they said you cannot use vacancy savings. You can only use 2 months of 12 months worth of vacancy savings. So 2/12, whatever that percentage is, 8% or so, 8.5% of your vacancy saving is all you can use towards your raises, the wage increase. And so then we looked around and Jaime thought, boss, I maybe don't have to buy one of the new routers in my capital equipment purchase. And we thought, okay, there's some more dollars. We won't buy one of the trucks. And then we find out, no, you can't use capital equipment because that's just a one-time savings. They want it to be a continual savings. So the clock's ticking, my back's against the wall. And I said, I'm brilliant. I will take that difference in money and I will take what's left of the 1.5 after you take 2/12 of vacancy savings, basically what's left. I will take that proportional amount from electricity, chemicals, and repair and maintenance, 3 of my bigger categories. And so it's kind of not a significant, huge amount out of there, but it is real money that we plan to spend. And I'm going to have 10 months of vacancy savings that I'm going to use to buy electricity, chemicals, and repair and maintenance. It's a shell game, and we laugh, and I do too, because it's kind of crazy sometimes if you're not in the conversation of trying to talk how things are done. Well, Ellen's conversation to me yesterday or earlier this week was that they are in conversation with county administration that they may deal with vacancy savings difference this year. And I'm like, well, don't tell me I can't spend my vacancy savings, because that's $1.5 million I plan to take from there, which is about the difference. And so I have calls into county administration to meet with Jan and Carmine about that very topic. But if a policy change like that, it will again negatively impact it if in fact that happens. And I think that's another future topic and something at least maybe for the financial subcommittee to talk about, again, how we budget and why, and how we deal with those buckets, like vacancy savings that we've had every year for as long as I've been here. And so it's, in our mind, it's part of our budget. We have a $91.4 million budget, but they may say, hey, your vacancy savings of $1.5 million, you can't use it. And so that's going to put additional stresses on an already stressed year. So FYI, I'm sorry it took me so long to get through, but that's my recommendation for the next agenda item and or subcommittee, financial subcommittee.
Jackson, I need to correct just a little bit about what you said, or maybe just add some nuance to it. This year was an unusual year where the board made salary increase recommendations in June. Normally, during the budget process, those happen much earlier than that. This year, County Administration and Finance is working with the Board of Supervisors to have strategic direction provided from them early in the fall. So we won't be in that position of the end of June making a decision on increasing salaries impacting a budget that starts July 1st. So we are actively working with County Administration and the Board of Supervisors to create a path that will eliminate those kinds of issues happening at the last minute. I believe that in the past, I don't recall in my 20 years with the county, I don't recall them making a salary adjustment decision that late. Normally, those are made in early January or February. Granted, the budget doesn't get approved, but those recommendations were usually baked in. Our goal this year is to get, as I said, strategic direction from the board prior to the departments beginning to create their budget so that that can be factored in while you're creating your budget. So that's the first thing that I wanted to say. The second thing with regard to vacancy savings, the county currently has approximately 70, the countywide, because that's what I'm focused on, in addition to focused on, what wastewater is doing, approximately $77 million in budget tied up in vacant PCNs. That is a significant amount of budget authority. Part of the issue that I think a number of people are trying to address is, why do we have so many vacant positions? What can we do to recruit and fill those positions? And what is the appropriate range for vacancies? Is it 5%? Is it 10%? Is it more department specific or technical job specific? So those are all things that finance and county administration and HR are working to try to put some guardrails up so that we can have a more fruitful discussion as to what is driving those rates. And if they're vacant and they're vacant for an entire year, do we really, these are all theoretical questions, so I don't want Jackson, you to jump down my throat later and said, I said you didn't need these positions, so let's be very clear about that. But it begs the question, if you go for a full year or longer with those positions being vacant, are they really necessary? Are we doing work that is perhaps not necessary, or have we put in place processes that are making the job easier or more effective, and therefore we need fewer staff? Those are all questions when we're running as a county over 1,000, I think it's 1,200 vacant positions countywide. Those are all very large questions that we are trying to answer from a very global perspective. So when I told Jackson yesterday, because it was only yesterday, that we were looking at that, that's what we're doing. We are actually trying to grapple with some of those very large issues and how do we address them systemically in the county. Because as I said, we've got almost 1,200, maybe a little bit more vacant positions, and that equates to almost $77 million worth of budget authority that has been identified in the various departments.
So I think we need to stop the discussion right now, and I'll just make note to add this to the next agenda, since we're not under discussion and action items anymore.
Next,
Next on the future agenda is,
yes, you got questions, hands up.
yes, that's what I'm doing. On the future agenda items, Matt has a question.
Yes, it's a suggestion for a, excuse me, a possible future agenda item and would kind of depend on how it resonates with the rest of the committee. But in light of the CIP consolidation issue, I tried to think back to when consolidation activity started with the department and how many different functions have over the last 10 or 15 years been consolidated out of wastewater and into other departments. And my recollections yielded like 8 different areas. There was finance, IT, procurement, HR, safety, admin, CIP, and GIS. And I don't remember exactly how those happened, if in fact they all resulted in consolidated positions and funds moving from wastewater to other departments essentially to support their staff. I was wondering if maybe it would be good to take a look back, remind ourselves how many positions have been consolidated, look at all of those losses, if you will, in relation to the overall department size, and ask ourselves whether there has been any significant negative impact on the department and its management as a result of those changes, and ask ourselves or not ask ourselves, but maybe find out if this is the way that enterprise funds are supposed to be operated, or whether, and I'm not suggesting there's anything inappropriate going on as far as shifting funds to support those bodies in new departments, but there's bound to be an impact at some point. We've seen that maybe the tipping point is in the CIP area, but those of us who haven't been around for a decade or more don't know what happened in the past, and that this is basically a continuation of a pattern of management from the county or within the county. So I'm just suggesting that maybe a look back would be constructive, and I think I'd as much ask Jackson whether it would be helpful or not, and just take that 10 to 15 year look back to see what's changed over that time.
I agree with Matt on that.
It will definitely be interesting, so we'll put it on the agenda and see how available. I know at one point we were 596 positions, now we're 401, so a lot of consolidation and a lot of efficiencies in the past 15 years. But we'll see if we can string together a history for an agenda item for discussion, or just to see what it shows or where it goes from there.
On future agenda items, Claire, you had something to contribute?
Yes, I did. So I'm not sure if I mentioned this to the big group or just to Veronica, but I'm a member of the Santa Cruz Watershed Collaborative. I'm the representative on that, and Wastewater is also a partner on that, and they have created a watershed management restoration plan and are shopping it around to the different committees that are engaged with the partners, and to inform them about what it includes and how it can be used to increase collaboration and synchronize restoration efforts. So I've asked that go on a future agenda item unless anybody objects to it.
We got it. We'll put that on there too. Thanks, Cliff.
Okay, at some point, yeah. I think we talked about September, October. Thanks so much.
On future agenda items, I'd like to add one item. Everybody is talking about Colorado River conservation, water shortages and everything like that. I heard that, City of Tucson was stockpiling, water. We had a 5,000 foot, aquifer, that's, deep and all that. I was just curious, what type of a number, we might have, that we contribute at wastewater to put the reclaiming back into the ground. I just didn't know what type of numbers, what we have. That we can say we contribute to.
Yeah, we'll put an agenda item on a water discussion.
Any other future agenda items? Okay, hearing none, then we go to call to the audience.
Actually, can I say,
Yes.
can I say something on that? The WRC has just put together a fact sheet on water in Pima County. Kathy Chavez from Pima County was engaged in that process. And if we're having a water discussion, it might be really great to have that distributed and have a discussion about it, because there's a lot of facts that are brought together about Pima County as a whole on water in that sheet.
Very good, Claire. That's good. Any call to the other, now we're in the call to the audience. Anything from anybody from call to the audience? Armando, okay, put your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just gonna give you an update on my status. On June the 14th, I woke up and I found out that I could not walk. Paramedics came, took me to the hospital. They ran tests, and on June the 16th, they operated on my C3 to my C6. They put in a rod and screws. I had stenosis, and it affected the rest of my body from that point on. The good part of the surgery is that I'm still in recovery. I'm at home now. And the only thing that's left is I have to learn how to walk again. I'm getting along on a indoor walk, but my strength and stamina is pretty low. And we're working on that. I didn't realize that the doctor said it would take 6 months to a year. I figured I could have that done in 2 months, but I'm learning fast that his expertise is a heck of a lot better than mine. So I missed the June meeting, and luckily we didn't have a July meeting. I hope to be back from this point on. It's going to be virtually. And that's it. Thank you.
Our prayers are going to be with you, Armando, for a speedy recovery. Okay.
We're all behind you, Amanda.
Any more call to the audience? Okay, then I'm gonna call for an adjournment. Do I have an emotion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
Asia has motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Eve Foley is second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Abstains? Thank you, everyone, for attending. Our next meeting is going to be on Thursday, September 22nd. And hopefully everybody can attend virtually or in person. I will be doing it virtually because I'm going to be out of town. If I could just ask Veronica and Claire to stay online so I can talk to them. But thank you, everyone, for attending. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Everyone.
Take care.